Welcome to EnVision Center News, where we discuss community impact and involvement with today's nonprofit leaders and philanthropists.
Gentlemen, hello and welcome to the podcast. Excited to talk about a very new school in the area in Valor. But before we get into the stuff that you're doing with and for the school, can you both just tell me a little bit about yourselves?
Go ahead. So, my name is Luke Patterson. I'm one of the founders of the school, and I am the president of the board. And looking forward to talking a lot about the backstory of the school and why we started and all that. My background is in business, so I started off in computer science and ended up starting a number of different tech businesses back in the day. Still work a lot in tech nowadays, and began to be very interested in education a number of years ago, and have really enjoyed bringing those two things together, the business kind of startup side with classical education and, of course, my Christian faith.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Was that spurred on your interest in education because of your kids?
Certainly that was part of it.
Yeah.
Yes, that was certainly part of it. But I think just kind of long-standing studies in cultural formation and, reading a lot of old books, I think there's a lot to be said about the importance of education with shaping a culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Dusty, what about you?
Yeah, so I'm Dusty Smith. So I've spent probably the last 21 years in education, like straight out of college. It's what I wanted to do. So a lot of time as a high school math teacher. I've coached football and soccer, and my family spent about 8 years abroad teaching internationally in Morocco. And then we moved back to the United States just in time for COVID. So that was a really different season for education. But over the last, I'd say probably 5 or 6 years, I've really been trying to transition from public schools into private Christian education. So a few years ago, this opportunity at Valor opened up, and my family and I decided to move from Montana over to North Idaho, and we've been here for about a year and a half, really enjoying it so far.
Nice. And okay, so let's talk about the formation of the school. I think there isn't a Christian high school here in Sandpoint, right? So that's opening number one. But it's not, every Christian school isn't the same. So you can talk about what specifically was your goals with the formation of this particular school.
Yeah, I think you hit on it in the right order. First and foremost, no Christian high school option was around for quite a while. I think maybe something had been started and then it didn't last very long, quite a while back. So just looking at the educational landscape and assessing that level of need, we have a number of primary schools and or middle schools that are Christian. But then where do the high schoolers go? Yeah. So that was the primary driver. And then as we began to dig into it, it's such an amazing opportunity to start as a clean slate. And we didn't want to pass that up and simply take an existing, maybe status quo model off the shelf and run with that. We really wanted to take our time to evaluate what it is that we were going to build and be very thoughtful and intentional. So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about it, but classical education is a big part of our focus, as well as worldview formation. All people really have a worldview, and a lot of times we don't even know what that worldview is, but it comes out in day-to-day life all the time in the way that we perceive different things, the way we navigate complex or even simple choices. And so we wanted to set up an environment, particularly from a Christian worldview, to help shape our students in that way.
And how long was it from the first time, I don't know, maybe it was your wife you told, I think we should start a school, whoever you uttered that out loud to first, from that point, how long did it take for you to actually do the ribbon cutting at the school?
Okay. Man, probably a couple of years.
Okay.
And you actually have it reversed. It was my wife came to me and said, "Hey, we should think about starting a school." And I was not quite sure at that point. Having started businesses gave me enough of an understanding of what it might be like to start a school to know, man, this is not a trivial thing. This is going to be a lot of my life. Yeah. Am I ready for that? Are we ready for that? But yeah, I think it was a good solid 2 years of planning and ramp up before we got to our ribbon cutting.
And at what stage did you get hired, I guess.
Yeah. So I came and visited Sandpoint and Valor Christian School about a half year through their first year. So I came in for interview and visited the school, and then came back at the end of the first year to take over as the principal. So I'm now about a year and a half into that process.
And were things kind of, I mean, as far as kind of mission and codes of conduct and those kinds of things kind of established already when you came in, Dusty, or did you help write some of that?
No, I would say all the things you would expect in terms of handbooks, policies, course catalog was all in existence and running. You know, as time has gone on, there's been some modifications we've made,
Sure.
but that was something when I read through the website and some of those documents, I was very impressed with the amount of detail that existed for a school less than a year old.
And I feel like maybe, Luke, a little bit, you're probably not meaning to, but you're kind of throwing shade at other Christian schools in a sense that you're like, we were glad to have a fresh slate and to build, and not just, you know, go pull from something that already was out there. Maybe you're going to create your own kind of vision and curriculum or whatever that is. Is that true that you felt like maybe no one's really doing at least no one nearby or accessible that you can immediately leapfrog off of is doing this the right way? We're going to do this. Or maybe a lot of Christian schools have become lost and they started off doing things right. Can you correct me or affirm what I'm saying?
Yeah, maybe somewhere in the middle. I mean, maybe it's being having an entrepreneurial background, really going into something new. There is just that mentality of, well, what could we maybe do a little bit better, or maybe what mistakes could we just circumnavigate and not have to go through at all, right? And I think there's prudence in that, and not so much to cast aspersions on existing schools, because I think overall a lot of us, like, we're working for the same goals, broadly speaking. For us, it was more of, what do we personally feel convictions about when it comes to education, and what might we do that is maybe a little bit different than what's being done, at least around here, like you said. But all of that really is to answer this question, which is, what is education for? And whatever that is for, whatever the end goal is, what model can we adopt? What methods can we utilize to have the best outcome towards in that direction, right? So really kind of starting at the philosophical level and working our way back is what we did. And through all that, we realized, okay, like we actually might want to do some things differently, because we do have in mind some specific outcomes that we're aiming at, and we recognize, broadly speaking, that those are not always the case, not always found.
Yeah, there's a wide variety, obviously, in what counts as a Christian school. If you just were to do a Google search, right, and take it state by state or whatever, you're going to find a wide range of what their belief systems are and what lines they draw in the sand culturally or otherwise. So, I'm not throwing shade either. There's obviously amazing Christian schools out there, but I would say from my own perspective, there's also some schools that are maybe Christian in name only, or at least that's what it seems like if I were to, look at their website and kind of read about what they believe and what their goals are. So to go back to something you just said, what is the goal of an education? Like, how do you measure success in your students when they graduate from Valor and move on with their lives?
Yeah. I would say that question is derivative of a higher order question, which is, what is the purpose of life at all, right? And that's where I think worldview is always there, no matter if you're operating a Christian school, a non-Christian school, a STEM school, a classical school. What you think that the end goal of life is kind of the core foundation piece. And so for us, we're Christians. We believe that the end goal of life is to glorify God and enjoy Him. And so those are the two things that everything else is built on. Career prep is, I would say, the most widely accepted goal of education in the Western world today. And that's certainly not out of scope for us.
Right.
But I would say that it's not the only primary thing. I think that there's a whole lot of other aspects of life that are very meaningful, and we are working to ensure that our graduates are well prepared to succeed in those aspects of life.
Do you get pushback even from other Christians that are like, no, the goal of this is we want our kids to get into college and have an amazing career, and almost there's an education piece for parents too who have been so inundated in like the Western idea of what an education is for. We say, well, yeah, those things are great, but this is actually our goal.
I think there could be some of that for sure. And like you're saying, I mean, it's a broad landscape, right? So there's so many options these days. Wherever you're at as a family in terms of what your goals are for your kids and what their goals are, there's a lot of different options for you to pick from. So I would say our school is not the best fit for everybody, but neither is any. And so we're really definitely wanting to put that out front for families. If this is what you want for your kids, if you're wanting maybe a more holistic education, you might want to consider us.
And Dusty, what's the number one question you think you get from parents who are just kind of exploring the option of going to Valor?
Yeah. I mean, at this stage, I think it's going to change year to year.
Yeah.
We had a really high growth year last year with probably 35 to 40 new students. And a lot of those students were coming in to the 7th or 8th grade level from a wide variety of schools. So parents are just wanting to know, what's the Valor experience going to be like? What's the homework load like? What kind of classes are they going to take? What are the books they're going to read? I think that's the main questions. But when I ask them what they're looking for, a lot of those families are wanting to transition their students into a school where they know their child and the students they're working with are Christians. They're being taught in a biblical worldview, and for many of them, it's getting out of maybe a situation where they've been homeschooling and they just feel they need more social interaction. And teachers come in who are experts and kind of take on some of those subjects that might be more challenging for parents. So that's kind of the question of what's that going to look like going from where we are to Valor.
Yeah. And how will, and you're currently doing this, and I think you hope to continue to grow, and obviously at some point will hit some sort of cap, but how does such a small community support a Christian high school? Because this town's smaller than my hometown, and we didn't have a Christian high school.
Yeah, I think there's just a larger demand here compared to other communities I've lived in of similar size for a style of education that doesn't fit the traditional mold of public education.
It's just kind of the culture that was already here.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot higher percentage of families who are already on a kind of a homeschool or maybe a co-op type track and are then at some point ready to transition. I also think culturally we're coming out of a time where there's a lot of reluctant homeschool families who maybe decided to transition out of public school during COVID. And at that moment in time, they felt that was going to be the best decision for their child. And now years later, they're saying, okay, we've been doing something. This wasn't our first choice. So what's going to be the next, what are we going to transition to now that is going to be good for a child as they go into upper, junior high and high school.
Did you have a thought about that?
No, I think everything Jesse said, for sure. As well as I think North Idaho is particularly freedom-loving people. And there's something about kind of self-reliance and ownership that's a part of that. And so I think that there's kind of independent thinkers as a whole in this area. And I think that maybe can lead a number of parents to consider, well, actually, I think the education of my kids is kind of my responsibility, at least to oversee. And so maybe I ought to think really critically about what that education is and find the best solution that aligns with my values and goals and that kind of thing.
Let's talk about the cost. How accessible is Valor to students?
Yeah, so we kind of are in the process of updating our tuition rates, but currently this year, students are paying $6,500 for a full year of tuition. And if you compare to national averages, we're certainly on the low end. If you compare to schools that are right here in North Idaho, private schools, whether they're Christian or not, I would say we're in the mid to lower range of that spectrum. So in terms of when you compare out, I think it's a pretty solid value for what students are getting.
How do you do that? How do you pull that off and keep the cost low?
Yeah, so we are Right now we have some individuals and organizations who have made significant donations to Valor over its first 3 years, who have really allowed us to go from a few students to, we're kind of getting in the range now where the numbers per grade are getting close to the kind of a financial stability point. But we've had great individuals supporting us, and without that, I think it's just been God's provision to ensure we've had what we needed all along the way.
And how many students ideally, what is your cap per grade or total?
Yeah, it's I'd say a little bit of a moving number. I mean, we're in a building where we've looked at the building, we've looked at the size of the building and said probably 15 to 16 students per grade level is where we could feel comfortable. If we got to that point and we thought, we could allow a few more in, we could push beyond that a little bit. So school, 7th through 12th grade, probably in the range of 90 students is where we would need to say that's the most we can physically accommodate. And really that's a great small class size when you look at high schools.
So is it one of those things where the students stay in the same room and the teachers go to them, or how does that work when you have such a small school?
At this point, teachers are usually working in maybe 1 or 2 classrooms throughout the day, and students are also rotating. Okay. So they may find themselves in the same room throughout the day, but usually each period they're getting up and rotating like you'd see in a normal junior high or high school setting.
Okay. And what are the extracurriculars? What's your philosophy about that? Does it differ a lot from the way public schools treat extracurricular stuff?
I would say, the differ is our facilities right now kind of stipulate what we can do. But in terms of extracurriculars, we've had a women's volleyball team the last 2 years. It's grown tremendously. We've got a great coach. They had a pretty successful season for being their second year out. And then we also have a high school trap and skeet shooting shotgun team. So they were in their first year last year and learned a lot and made a lot of great progress. And for both those teams, there's more students next year that are planning to sign up and join. We're kind of in the exploration phase of what other sports we could add that don't require a big facilities investment.
Right.
We've kind of kicked around cross country, golf. Is that the two we've...
Yeah, those are the main ones.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just as we, as our student body grows, we'll keep track of what interests are and then look to see what can we accommodate.
Would that just be part of the, like in a public school, you can go try out for the basketball team or whatever? Is it the same thing, or is there an additional cost if you want to do volleyball?
Yeah, it is. No, they go try out, and then each team is responsible. This year the volleyball team did some fundraisers. Okay. A little bit of coming out of the school budget. Some of those teams may have some small fees associated with them in the future, but it would be, I think, pretty affordable.
Yeah, yeah. And what are kind of the goals, if there's anything special other than just continue to grow and get to that point where you're kind of maxing out the students per grade? Like, is there a vision to one day we're going to build a new building, or what's like the big dream 10 years down the road?
I think most nonprofits probably have a series of steps that they're hoping to someday accomplish, right? And the North Summit group has been so hospitable to the school, and really, it's the reason why the school has been able to launch. So they have been amazing. That said, their building isn't getting bigger,
right?
So eventually, at some point, we'll probably need to be finding somewhere else that's larger, right? And whether that's, buy and then build, renovate to suit, or it's all up in the air. It just really depends on our partners in the community. And if there's someone who comes along that has a large vision like ours and who would partner with us to make that happen, we'll see. I think, though, from my standpoint, what I care about is a lot less of that kind of thing, what the building looks like, how big it is, how shiny it is. And it really is the success of our mission and the lives of our graduates. That's what all this is for. Every little bit of it is to support that. It's to support our students and what it is that we're trying to do. So having students come back in 5, 10, 15, 20 years after they've graduated and share with us how their life is going and how hopefully in some positive ways we've really helped set them up for success and prepare them. That's what I'm looking forward to. Those are the dreams that I have, right?
Yeah.
Having multi-generational families bring their kids back to the school, having graduates come back and teach at the school. This is something that we're really building for the Christian community here, and that we want to see running and being successful in that mission far after we're gone.
How far out are you pulling students from, like geographically?
I think our farthest away student is just over the border into Montana.
Oh,
so
yeah.
they're driving in daily. Otherwise, Sagal, Bonners Ferry. That's kind of the...
Maybe Naples.
Yeah,
up there.
Naples.
Yeah.
And then maybe some families a little bit farther south than Sagal. So, yeah.
And what are the are there any shorter term goals or needs that you have? Like if someone came in and they're like, I can't write you the multi-million-dollar check, but I'd like to write you a check, like smaller things that maybe the school needs.
Yeah, I think you talked about earlier, but keeping tuition affordable. So something we've done in last year is just create a dedicated scholarship pool that people could donate into, and we are then trying to offer financial aid back to students out of that, so that we have our published standard rate, and then when families come in, if they do apply for financial aid, we're meeting kind of a one-off review of where that family is and what would it take to help them go from being unable to afford it to being able to afford it, and then those funds can be used to offset that.
So somebody shouldn't be afraid to come talk to you guys if they feel like they can't afford it at the time.
Yeah, rough average last year, if you took all of our students and kind of divided back what either through discounts or actual scholarships were, it probably came to about the the average student was paying about 75% of published tuition.
Okay.
So
What has been the most surprising thing about starting the school? I'm sure there's been many, because this was so new to you. You weren't like an education guy, but what has been? It can be a good surprise or a bad surprise, any kind of surprise.
Man, that's a hard one. I think thankfully having a background in business and startups, working in the tech startup world for so much, I knew a lot of what to expect, even though the context is different. I think that maybe it's hard to find teachers who are maybe there's just challenges in general, right? You're trying to balance a number of things when you're starting any type of nonprofit. It's finding qualified contributors that you can afford to pay, where the alignment in their career is at the right spot for them to hop over and try something. Finding individuals in the beginning who have a high tolerance for risk because it's a brand new school, versus at the same time as bringing a level of quality and professionalism, and then subject matter expertise as well. And especially because we're continuing to go in the classical direction, there is there's maybe an elevated requirement for having specific domain knowledge and passion in that domain, because there's less of kind of prepackaged textbooks that you're going to be teaching from, and more knowledge of source material and the corresponding passion for that source material. So I'd say those are things maybe we weren't fully anticipating from the beginning, but we've been blessed. This year we've hired on a few new teachers, and likely will next year as well. And overall, we've been having a really great team, and that's been something that's been very rewarding for me to see. Dusty and his family. We have another family who's moved into this area for the school as well. And
I was going to ask you my next question: how many are moving in for it? Because if you're a fit, I imagine this is probably some educator's dream job, to come be in this kind of environment. They just have to find out about you. So you said there's one other family moving in from.
Yeah, we hired someone this year that had relocated or was in the process of relocating, and reached out and we interviewed them, and she's been a great fit for our school so far this year.
But the other teachers have mostly been kind of local or already were
Yeah,
in the
I would
area?
say, not that they all grew up here, but I would say anyone else who's working at school right now has probably been in Sandpoint like 5 years or more. And whether they were working at another job previously or teaching in another school and then transitioned over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you said, Luke, where are you originally from? Did you say that at the beginning?
I didn't. No, my family and I have been here for, it's going to be 11 years this fall. So we made our way up from California back in the teens,
Yeah.
and we've been here for
So
quite
you were
a
here
while now,
before
so-
COVID.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what brought a tech guy up to Northern Idaho?
Oh man, so many things. I think just living in California for a while, began to realize, I think I might actually want something a little bit different for my kids in my life than maybe the cultural experience of California, and kind of just looking at some trajectories. Really wanted to get into a small town, a town that valued personal freedom and responsibility, like I mentioned before, and one that was just a little bit slower and valued personal relationships, and a place where I felt like we could really build some deep roots and hopefully make an impact in some way.
And it was dawning on me as we were talking earlier that maybe one or both of you could just define what a classical education is for somebody who, everybody in this room right now knows what a classical education is, but there could be someone listening who does not.
Yeah, we could probably, and we might all have slightly different answers,
Right.
and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I would say there's a number of things I would say about that. First and foremost, we are really not shy from valuing the past and what the past offers us. And I think we live in, I work in one of the most modern focused sectors, which is technology, which is only if it's new is it valuable, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as it's a year old, right? And I think in our culture, we've done that a lot. And part of that is we've maybe disconnected ourselves from some of the foundations of our culture and civilization and a whole lot of wisdom that the past has to offer us. And so a big part of what we're trying to do is, in a way, recover that wisdom. And that's generally, as well as from a Christian standpoint, our forefathers, whether that's the early church fathers to the reformers to the founding fathers of this nation, had a lot of really, really great, important ideas. And so part of what we're trying to do is have our students spend a little bit more time in source material. So reading the actual books, not just a segment in a textbook, but a lot more source material, and then learning how to interact with that in a way that is productive. And so that could be a lot more written and verbal communication, debate, synthesizing a number of complex ideas, learning how to debate things from another point of view. Those are all components.
Yeah, I think too, just realizing, like if you think about the typical junior high school educational experience now, subjects are very departmentalized, and sometimes there's a push to bridge across, but so often what you learn in one class has nothing to do with what you're learning in another class. And I think a real value of classical education is kind of peeling back one more layer and trying to make sure that students are learning how to learn, and that the content in that class is just the material that you're using to teach them how to learn. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That content has value in its own also, but then, like Luke said, when they start, whether it's reading, writing, speaking, communicating about that stuff, they're putting all those tools together to think about, what can we do with this knowledge? Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? How does this knowledge connect to something that's in another class? And that's something that's going to come out through classical education.
Yeah. I love that. I'm curious, what is the role of technology in the school? Like everybody has an iPad, they're working on laptops, you're learning about AI. What is it? Because in the classical education space, people have very different approaches and opinions about where technology should fit in or not fit in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be as you define it, right? Like I think you could say, we're using that technology to do a lot of things, but we are intentionally just kind of sitting back and saying, okay, there is so much negative things occurring through students spending too much time on screens. Let's step back from that and decide if this is an activity where there's a clear benefit to using the device, whether it be composing a paper or doing some research. Like, okay, let's thoughtfully think about how we want to integrate it. If there's not a real reason, then let's leave the computer off and away and find another way to do it. Whether that's just get out the actual book or do some writing.
No, not the actual book.
And we have a few teachers who really encourage students like, okay, let's write this by hand, write it out, do some revising. And I think there's value in that. I know personally, when I sit down and write with a notebook versus sit at a screen typing, I think there is a little bit different. Your brain can disengage from that other thing and just think about what it is you're trying to say.
So I work with artificial intelligence quite a bit, and I truly believe that the future will be most beneficial to those who have robust powers of thought and original thought as well. I think if we view artificial intelligence as a very, very powerful tool that responds to instruction and to guidance, I think a precondition to successful usage of that is wisdom, knowledge, the ability to communicate, and the ability to really think well. And so I think we're trying to target those higher level skills more than the hands-on application. I think the application is the easy part.
Yeah.
It's easy for anybody. I mean, you can just do voice commands, right? It doesn't take a whole lot of skill there. What takes, I think, the skill and what takes the hard work is forming those discipline thinking pathways. And so technology isn't necessarily needed for that. And sometimes I think can shorten our ability to focus and think through a problem fully by making things a little bit too easy for us. So the hard part of what we're trying to do is, in a sense, we're pushing back and really kind of forcing our students to do some of the harder work, which is formational for them. Even if you could get there faster with a technology tool, they're learning and growing in ways that I think are substantial and worthwhile.
Yeah, like a really concrete example for me would be, today, so much research. When students are writing, they have the option to go out and research. They can access anything that's on the internet. Instead of just opening that door wide open to them, I'm encouraging teachers, pick a few sources, give those sources to the students. And now in this limited focus, let's talk about what do these sources actually say? What are they supporting? What are they refuting? Are they reliable or not? And if they can do that with a source you've given them, they can go that later and do that with any sources they find in their research. But how well is a teacher going to be able to critique each resource? If you have a room of 15 students and they all go out and find 3 or 4 things that they've searched on the internet or through AI, there's no way that teacher's going to sit down and go student by student, item by item, and critique the validity of that. So that's where, again, trying to build that tool of now, if they can do that with what you're giving them, they can, go do that with other information.
Yep. Okay, enrollment. How does that work? Are there specific times when people can enroll?
Yeah, so we are just kind of coming up onto our enrollment window opening. In February, all of our returning families obviously will be able to declare their intent and re-enroll for the coming year. Online applications will be open soon. So if people visit our website, there's a button they can click on to apply. And probably initially we'll be just taking those applications, seeing how many per grade level. Once we know our re-enrollment numbers, then the process is we would reach out to a family, schedule an interview. So I sit down for a meeting with parents and the student of all of our new students. So last year probably conducted 45 different interviews with families. And it's a chance for them, obviously, to ask me questions, get to know more what the school's like, and then a chance for me to just gauge what is this family, what are they really looking for? What do they value in education? And try and help them determine, is Valor a good fit for what they want to do? So that at the end of the day, when they get that acceptance letter, then they can decide, is this what we want to do for our child? And is this going to be what's best for them? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that process is opening soon.
And what would you say to someone who is maybe like not a believer, but they're sort of a cultural Christian? They like the sound of Valor, but they're not a part of a church. They aren't a believer. Can they still show up and do an interview with you? And how does that work?
Yeah, I think ideally we do strongly believe that, the family and the church are things that God has put in place to disciple and train children, and that, a family should be teaching their children, the ways of God. They should be getting that through a church, and that then we are coming along and partnering to help provide an education that reinforces the things they are being taught in their home and in a church. That I think we just would believe that the likelihood that a student is going to be transformed just by what they're learning at school is not as great as if they're being told the same thing throughout all the the different places they spend time throughout their day and throughout their week. So yeah.
Yeah, I think in one way I view us as a tool in the hands of parents to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, right? And so we want to work with students or with parents who have the same end goal that we have for their students, right? I think it would potentially introduce friction if we had opposing goals. So I don't know how helpful that would be. At the end of the day, we've kind of outlined, here's kind of the ideal graduate that we're trying to form through all of this, and we want to partner with parents who want that same outcome, right? And then we can work together, and they're going to do their work at home, and we're going to do our work at school. But it's all really in service to those parents and what their goals are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say a great place to start. If you go on our website, Statement of Faith is on there. Right? Yeah, so we have just a statement that has some of the kind of big talking points of, from a Christian perspective, what are the things that we believe and what are we going to be teaching in our classes. So if a family felt like they're not exactly sure where they fall on that spectrum, that'd be a great place to look and decide, yes, like that aligns with what our family believes, or it doesn't. And I've had meetings with a few family where they've had those questions and we've talked through it, and then they've gone away and made a decision. But I'd be happy to sit down and field those questions. Kind of a next level when parents have just wondered, they've gone through the application process. Is this going to be good for my child? Sometimes we'll schedule where they can come in for a morning or even a full day and just sit in classes with the students that they would be with that coming year, meet the teachers, participate in lessons, and that helps the child see what's it feel like to be a Valor student.
Yeah. The only reason I asked that question is I do feel like that we're in like an interesting cultural time where even I have friends that aren't believers themselves, but they're like, but I want to send my kid to a Christian school. They recognize the value in Christian values and things, and they might even be fine with their child converting to Christianity, but for whatever reason, the parent is not there yet or whatever, which sometimes happens, right? The kids go first and then the parents follow, or sometimes the parents never follow. So I could see that being maybe a somewhat more common occurrence than maybe it once was, where people are like, I really like the values and things. Now, I'm not going to like cross up or go to church, but I like my kids being surrounded by these kids too. Yeah. The kids that are raised in that culture, I like my kids being associated with them. So I could see that being a conversation that you have more often than maybe you'd expect. But
yeah, and we'll see in the coming year what that, kind of the profile of applicants looks like. But so far, I would say the vast majority of families that have applied have been able to look at that application process and say, this is a good fit for what we believe and want for our child.
Awesome. Well, Is there anything else that we didn't get to? We kind of talked about the formation, your goals, the cost, enrollment.
Yeah.
Anything else that you think people need to know about Valor? How'd you pick the name? There's a lot of things that you could have named, but I'm sure you went through many iterations. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you knew right from the jump. God just said Valor. That's it.
How do we pick the name? And we had a list for sure, but I think when Valor as a word points to battle first and foremost. You can't avoid that, right? And of course, courage is a key part of Valor, but really the context is this idea of conflict. And as much as we might like to avoid thinking about that, especially with our kids, I would think a lot of Christian parents would stand back and look at the culture at large and realize there is a level of conflict that's going on. And thankfully, it's not usually physical, right? But there is, I think, a conflict of values. There's a conflict of vision. There's a conflict of, again, like I said, the core question, why are we here? Where are we going? How do we get there? And what we're trying to do in our school is help prepare our students to live in that conflict well on behalf of truth, goodness, and beauty. And there's a level of contending for that in each person's own life. And that's really like where our focus is. But then there's different levels beyond that, right? Where I think at times we have to stand for truth, goodness, and beauty in public for some people at certain times, right? And how well are we preparing for that? And that's where I think forming habits and capabilities of thought, of communication, and of moral character are so crucial, right? And I would just say that I similarly have friends who maybe are not Christian believers, but they have their kids in Christian schools. And it's been such an interesting thing. And the thing I would say is that disconnecting values from their source is something that I just don't think we should be doing. And that is why I'm such a believer in Christian education and in what we're doing at Valor, because there is no attempt to try to divorce values from their source. It's the actual opposite. And so in everything we're doing, we're always trying to follow the threads back to where they come from and to teach our students how to do that. And that we want them to have a fully supported foundation. And I believe that that's only possible through Christ. And that's really what we're trying to teach our students in every area of discipline, whether it's science, history, literature, all the different disciplines. These are all, from our view, built squarely on a foundation of Christ and on pursuing our knowledge of him and understanding him as the source of all of these great things that we're enjoying, and that is, we feel like, worth the sacrifice of what it is that we're doing. If we can have our students and graduates have great values, but understand that those are attributes of a person. They're not just floating around in the air that we can pick whatever we want from and assemble our own type of identity, but that we're actually, we have to submit to something or somebody. And so at Valor, we are doing everything we can to encourage our students to submit to the Lord Jesus Christ in every area. And that takes courage, because there's an element of self-sacrifice. There's an element of just being willing to lay down whatever the thing is in the situation. And so that's our, I think, ideal that we're aiming at.
Beautiful. Well, I dig it. I'm into it. I'm glad that you guys are here. I thank you for doing what you do, and I wish Valor all the success in the world.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. For more information, you can go to crecIdaho.com. Please like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again soon.